Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those of you who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. There's not a lot in terms of extra things that I need to talk to you guys about, except that pretty much my reading this week was heavily influenced by the Melbourne Writers Festival and the Day of Romance panels that I went to, because I basically got a whole lot of recommendations and I just wanted to read romance books all week, which I'm not sorry about. The Tome Infinity and Beyond Round 3 readathon also started on Friday, so I have read 2 books towards that challenge, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. So let's dive into it. This is my reading week from the 8th to the 14th of September. I read 8 books this week, 7 of them were adult, 1 was a middle grade book. I read a total of 2,660 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 268 books. The first book that I read this week was recommended by Jodie McAllister on one of the Romance Day panels, and that was The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is a 2019 release from Avon Impulse, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was a fantastic read. This is a historical female romance story, and it follows the main character Lucy, who has just had to sit through the wedding of her lover, and it was a rather unexpected wedding. She didn't know that her best friend and lover was going to get married, and that's all just sort of suddenly happened, and she's had to sit through it. So she's obviously distraught, and she is trying to find her place in the world. Her father has recently passed away. Her older brother treats her like all men treated women back in the day. And Lucy herself is actually an accomplished astronomer. She used to work with her father as his assistant, but in fact, she is very, very skilled in astronomy and mathematics. While trying to work out how she's going to move forward with her life, she reads a letter from the Countess of Moth, whose husband has also passed away. And the Countess of Moth is working on a project with the scientific community on translating a French astronomy text into English for others to use. And so Lucy puts herself forward as a translator for the text, and in doing so ends up moving in with the Countess of Moth and discovering that 1, she has a deep respect for the Countess, whose name is Catherine, and 2, she also begins to become attracted to her, and as the two work really closely together as women in the sciences and the arts who are not taken seriously by the men within their community and their chosen fields, they begin a relationship, and it is just wonderful. I absolutely adored it, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Then I read Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro and Cornelia Funk. This was a review copy sent to me by Bloomsbury. It is a 2019 release from Bloomsbury, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I've never seen Pan's Labyrinth, and this is the novelization of the film, and it's very rare that films are then novelized, but this was a really well done story, and it really evoked the same sense that I think that the film would. I will eventually see the film at some point, but I just haven't seen it yet. It is the story of Ophelia, who is a young girl. Her mother has been widowed, and her mother has just remarried, and so they're moving into her stepfather's house, and he is not a particularly nice man, and he is leading an army against a group of rebels. When Olivia moves into her new home, she discovers that there are woods, and in the woods she discovers a doorway into a labyrinth, and there she meets the Faun, who is sort of this omnipotent guide for her, and you can't quite get a sense of whether or not he is actually benevolent or malevolent, and he is quite an interesting sort of character. The story is very, very dark. It's dark fantasy. I was really, really intrigued by it, and I'm very glad that I read it, so thank you to Bloomsbury for sending it to me. Then I read Sinnott by Sierra Simone. This is a 2018 release. I got it on Kindle and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is very, very adult romance. It is the second book in the Priest series. I haven't read the first book, but this one I was more interested in and picking it up sooner, so I've done that. I will probably pick up Priest at some point. The main character in this is Sean Bell. He is a venture capitalist. He is very well renowned within the business community, and he's also used to being very much in control. He spends a lot of time sleeping around. He doesn't do relationships, but he is very, very close to his family, and his family was impacted by the death of his sister when they were all much younger, and now his mother is also going through treatment for cancer, and the prognosis is not very good. So he's very, very controlled. So he's a very controlled sort of character. He doesn't like sort of outside interference or things that are going to disrupt what he already knows. One night at a donor party where he is attending, he comes across a much younger girl. So Sean is 36 in this, and Zenny is 21, and he's instantly attracted to her, and the two sort of have this playful conversation, and then he gets a call that his mother's back in hospital, so he leaves, and he never quite figures out who this girl is because she gives a false name. And then he stumbles across her much later on when one of the deals that he's done for his work reveals that the building that they are going to be purchasing is actually going to result in a group of nuns being evicted from a property that they had been renting. It's Sean's job to try and minimize the public fallout from something like that. And there he runs back into Zenny, who is actually preparing to take her vows as a novice. And he also realizes that she's the younger sister of one of his very good friends, and that when they were much, much younger, he knew her as a child. And so it's this very dark taboo sort of relationship. Not only do you have the age difference, but you also have the fact that she is preparing to become a nun, and they sort of embark on this last ditch romance. And they don't expect anyone's feelings to get hurt. And then, of course, it develops into something more. Very dark, very steamy, a very interesting read. And I'm very glad that I read it. I really enjoyed it. Then I read Rock Hard by Nalini Singh. This is book 2 in the Rock Kiss series. It was a 2015 release from TKA Distribution, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This series is set around a group of rock stars from schoolboy choir. And I think I read the novella last week. However, this particular book follows the best friend of the main character from the first book, Charlotte, who is a very quiet, meek, unassuming sort of character, and her boss, who she calls T-Rex, because he literally, in the first book, he came into her workplace and started firing people because they were inept at their jobs. This book sort of parallels part of the storyline from the first book and then takes on a life of its own as Gabriel and Charlotte, find a way to work together, and then Gabriel tries to pursue Charlotte as a love interest. Again, alpha male character. Charlotte herself really steps up and stands up for herself later on, which I really, really appreciated. There's a stalker subplot. Charlotte herself has had a history of trauma where she was kidnapped and assaulted and is still dealing with the after effects of that. And Gabriel himself also has emotional trauma in the sense of abandonment by his father when he was very, very young. So he has a lot of resentment there. So the two have to reconcile all of those things. Then I read the third book in the Rock Kiss series, which is Rock Redemption, also by Nalini Singh. This was published, I think, as well in 2015 by TKA Distribution. Again, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Nalini Singh's writing is pretty solid the whole way through. This story follows one of the band members from schoolboy choir, Noah. Noah has had a very traumatic past and he finds it really difficult to connect with people. He actually doesn't like being intimate, but he uses sex as a drug as a way of sort of unburdening himself and trying to get through day to day instead of turning to actual drugs. At one point, he was starting to develop a relationship with Kit, who is an actress that the band is very, very friendly with. He finds himself falling in love with her, but because he doesn't do relationships and because he is self-sabotaging, he lets her catch him sleeping with someone else, which is slightly problematic. But the whole point is he's trying to push her away because she's starting to fall for him, but he can't see a way to move forward because he doesn't want to hurt her. So he intentionally hurts her to push her away. Then one night they appear together in public for a charity event, and the press run with it and decide that they're in a relationship, and Kit's trying to land this really big important role. And she's told by her publicist, now you need to actually play up this relationship because it's going to get you this role. And if you break up in public now, chances are you will lose the role. And so they begin this sort of fake dating thing. And they have to confront all of their issues with one another, which was an interesting read because the romance part of it is very up and down, and the actual realization that they could make a relationship of this doesn't come to much, much later. It's like 80% of the way through the book. So it was interesting in that it still held my attention, even though it kept pushing it back further and further into the text. So I enjoyed it. It's probably not my favorite of the Rock Kiss books, but I still enjoyed revisiting the characters and seeing all the other side characters popping in and out as well. Then Tome Infinity started and I read Waist Tide by Shufan. Maybe, I don't know how to pronounce that properly and I don't want to be that person who mispronounces everything. I read this for the challenge to read a book set in Asia, and this is set in China. It was translated by Ken Liu, so it is a translated work. It was originally published in 2013. This edition was published by Head of Zeus and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It is set in a future China where all of the e-waste in the world really gets sent to this one place called Silicon Isle. And there are 3 clans that sort of rule and manage Silicon Isle, and they all have workers called waste people who dig through all of the e-waste and find the metals and the materials inside it that are worth keeping. At the start, a group of men are sent over there in order to try and push through a deal where an American company will help them to recycle all of the materials, even though America is the prime reason that they have all of them, the waste there in the first place. And the translator, who is a Chinese American man, he meets one of the waste girls, Mimi, and he's quite enamored by her. He actually helps save her from a group of thugs, and the two strike up a friendship and sort of a pseudo relationship until something happens to Mimi and she begins to change, and this is where the sci-fi elements begin to come into it. This was a really interesting read. The whole concept itself was really, really fascinating for me. I think I got bogged down a lot in the details, and that made it really hard for me to sort of tune in all the time. I felt like at times there were parts where I was glazing over. It was not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I really did like it. The whole concept of it was absolutely fascinating, and what happens to Mimi is really, really intriguing. But yeah, sometimes when you have these almost, it's not hard sci-fi, but it feels like it, sometimes I get a little bit stuck, and that's just the way that my brain is. But I'm so pleased that I read it, because it was very, very interesting to read another translated work on such an environmentally sensitive topic. So I very much enjoyed actually having a go at this. Then I read Beneath the Dark Ice by Greg Beck, and this was for the challenge to read a book set in Antarctica. This was a 2019 release from Macmillan Australia, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars as well. This is a story that is mystery, action, / horror / sci-fi. So there are elements of sci-fi in it, but it's not a straight up science fiction book. But the whole thing is set in Antarctica. Basic premise is, at the start of the book, a corporate plane crashes into the Antarctic ice, and there is a group of scientists and military personnel who are sent there to recover them, and then everyone disappears. So we then get our main cast, which comprises of Alex Hunter, and the series is, and this is the first book in the Alex Hunter series. Alex Hunter is a soldier who was shot and should have died, but has actually had his brain changed as a result of the shooting. And so he's sort of developed these hypersensitive skills and awareness and abilities, which border on the sort of the superhero, supernatural sort of side of things, which is where the sci-fi element comes into it. This wasn't unpacked as in depth in this particular book, but there's definitely scope for it. It was very Matthew Riley-esque in terms of storytelling style, but it didn't have the finesse of Matthew Riley. Alex Hunter and his team of soldiers and scientists head down there because they think they may be able to discover a new deposit of oil or fuel for the world, and also to try and rescue the people that are down there, only to discover that they can't find traces of anyone anywhere. And then all of a sudden, some of these people start reappearing in weird places, and there are monsters and creepy things in the dark. So this is not a book to read if you're easily claustrophobic by proxy, because they end up going down into the ice and traveling underground. And there are times when I'm just like, and this totally reinforces why I will never ever go cave diving, because I could think of nothing worse. But it was a really interesting story, and I love anything set in Antarctica. I always have. So this was a fun sort of read, and there are some mythology elements woven into it that I quite liked. And I also read Pencil of Doom, which is book 2 in the Schooling Around series by Andy Griffiths. I'm not actually going to talk about it in this video because this is part of my secret video project that's probably going to take me about another 2 months to film, but I did read it. It is middle grade. It is sort of just contemporary fiction with a little bit of a fantasy element woven into it. It was published in 2008 by Pan Mac, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So that is everything that I read in the last 7 days. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books, and if you have, what you thought of them. Otherwise, let me know what you have been reading in the last 7 days. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.